All right, so the next 4 chapters are on fear, love, taking the first brave steps, and then the personalities.
Right.
And again, last weekend I had an interesting experience on the way to the retreat I was speaking at. Actually, it was right before I left. I was sick, I wasn't feeling well, and the whole 9 yards. And then on top of it, my husband and I got into a misunderstanding.
And as it always happens in those kind of circumstances.
Yes, the only thing that would have made it worse is if I was going to go speak on marriage, which that
happens
too.
Oh yeah.
But he had volunteered to cover my class for me because we're both teachers, and I thought we had agreed that he was just going to be there for 10 minutes for a quiz. And then it turned out, no, he said he was going to stay and supervise the students for the entire time. And I said, oh, no, you can just dismiss them. They can go to the library. And he said, no, I'm going to stay with them because that's what I think needs to happen. And I was like a bulldog that had just clamped on, and I was like, no, I wouldn't. And I even said I wouldn't have agreed to this if I had known this is what you're going to do. I said, then it escalated to, this is why I never ask you for help, because you always change things. And then, of course, it escalated to, why do you never accept things that I give you as just being good enough? Within 10 minutes, this whole thing had escalated. Our volume is higher. Of course, I can't because my voice isn't doing well.
No voice.
And he's upset, and I'm upset, and the crowning glory of the conversation was because I just kept at it. I would not let go. It was absolutely relentless. And his closing remark as he left was, well, maybe your control issues are way worse than you think they are.
Oh.
And of course, Saturday night's talk was on how trust creates connection or control. So I'm like, great.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
This is a perfect lead into my talk on control. So now, I'm not going to claim that I think the time or place was appropriate for any of what we said. However, as I was driving, I thought, okay, I can either get really upset about this, but honestly, I didn't have the energy for it. And I've been practicing some of what's in the book in terms of learning to self-soothe and calm myself and not, take everything and blow it out of proportion. And so as I was driving, because of course this is echoing in my mind, maybe your control issues are worse than you think, worse. And of course at the time I shot back and I said, well, I'm sure they are, as if, I'm this big expert. But I did. I was very prayerful. I said, okay, Lord, is there something here I need to know? If there's something here that I need to be convicted of? And so, and what really bothered me was, why did I hang on to this thing so much? What was it that I was so stubborn about? And really, what does control come down to? Well, it comes down to fear.
Right.
There's this fear that things have to, if things don't go my way, this is my particular personality, then, as my therapist used to say, well, then what? And we would get down to, well, then the world will come to an end.
Yes.
The sun will never rise again. Well,
right.
Okay, that might be a slight exaggeration. And I realized as I was driving, and it really hit me so hard that, I almost had to pull over because I was like, oh, that's what this is about. I realized that, well, as you know, a couple of years ago, we had a very beloved teacher on our campus die suddenly.
Yeah.
He had a stroke on Christmas Eve, and he died on New Year's Eve. And ever since then, I have been terrified that something's going to happen to Daniel. Oh. And I've connected it to overwork. And to all the demands that are placed on him because he's a pastor, he's a teacher, and
he plays a lot of different roles.
Wears a lot of different hats, and so without really being conscious of it, I've told myself to take up as little of his time as possible, to need him as little as possible, to demand as little as possible, to make sure that I'm not the one that that pushes him over. And I realized that my tenacity of insisting 10 minutes only, I didn't want him to spend a full 50 minutes in my classroom, was my desire to guarantee that I'm not going to lose him, that nothing's going to happen to him.
It's all fear,
and of course, it's craziness. I'm going to lose him because I'm going to drive him crazy at this rate. 40 extra minutes in my classroom probably isn't going to be the death of him. But I was really sobered by that, to realize, wow, here I am in a confrontation in which control is coming up, and I'm trying to tell him what to do, even though he's already made it. He's a grown adult; he can make his own choices. Right. What I could have said, and what in retrospect I wish I'd said, was thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Because I'm sitting here wondering why now that you've explained it, but when he says, "Oh, I'm going to stay for the full 50 minutes," I'm like, okay, well, that's no skin off of your nose. And yeah, isn't it so funny? We think we're acting out of love. Yeah. We're saying, I love you, so I'm trying to protect you. Yeah. But so I fear for you, so I'm going to control you.
Yeah. Ooh.
And So,
that's quotable.
you know, thank you. Only hard-won experience has taught me that, though. And so, yeah, so I guess when we look at that, you know, we're saying fear is the thing that keeps us bound to perfection, but love is the antidote. So you're saying what would have been loving is just say thank you. I so appreciate that you would do this for me.
Well, and now having come back to be able to say to him, okay, you remember that little interchange we had? And of course he'd rather forget, but I was able to talk to him and say, look, this is not an excuse. I'm not trying to say that what I did or said was okay, but here's what I've learned from it.
Yeah.
And he didn't see it coming. I mean, he really, of course, had no idea that's where my mind and heart were at.
Right.
And so it enabled us to have a good discussion about, you know, time and energy and how he's doing and, you know, my concern for him.
Well, and fear drives us to be codependent with people. You know, I talk about in the book, we brought Jake out just so that you could see our living example. Actually, he just decided this is where he was going to be the quietest, so we just let him stay there. But, you know, Jake is a freaky dog. He has a lot of fears. And one of the things he hates is when people are upset. Yeah. And so we have to fake being happy around him all the time. And I think that that's easy for our kids to do sometimes. Yeah. It's easy for us to do for our kids. Yeah. And so it's kind of a control. Like, I'm putting on a face, I can do all this, so you have to behave. You have to be okay. And it's kind of a scary way to live when you do it for too long, because you don't know what's the truth and what's reality. Yeah. So I think you really drilling down and saying, I did this based out of fear, but I want to do is respond with love, and so being able to do that. So the next portion is the next brave steps. So we are right. That's the next thing we're talking about. So we talked about fear and love. And we want to have that antidote, so we need to take these next brave steps in order to live this out. And so, yes, because we don't have the book memorized, aren't you glad? We actually do have lives, and we talk about other things. And so we were both talking about this one section. What was that? I get involved in new projects when. So, you know, you're on this page where... Explain a little bit about what...
Well, it's page 59 where we kind of cast the new vision, and there's just a whole list of statements, and we asked you to circle W, and we did this ourselves. W for what we want to do, and then D for what we already find ourselves doing. And, you know, the one for me that I'm in the midst of right now, I won't say that I'm doing it perfectly, but I'm trying to be really conscious of it. This is kind of where I feel God leading me right now, is I say yes when I'm ready to commit all the way to the entire process. Because for all my life, I'm a starter. My natural personality is to be a starter, and then when I lose interest... fun! Oh, it's great fun. Yeah. And, you know, when I've done the Strengths Finder, sometimes I've come up with motivator as a high one. But finisher, never, you know? Yeah. Detail, responsibility.
Well, because when you're starting something, there's no obstacles, there are no limits, there's no, you know, it's all potential and possibilities and lollipops and unicorns. And but once you get into it, and to finishing is hard. Yeah. I admire finishers greatly.
You know, I'm starting to pay more attention to them and value them more. And so for me, well, I was telling you earlier, one of the things for me is okay, I'll just go ahead and say it. I am about 2 years behind on my thank you notes. And I feel terrible because my mother raised me better than this. And, you know, there's a lot of traditions in our society that I know have gone by the wayside, but I mean, and you taught me to do thank you notes because you're also the queen of doing this. I see you doing them while you're at events. I do. You have them with you. And I saw you, it was your father's memorial service, and you had your thank you cards with you, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh. Wow. But part of it was you were committed to the whole process. Right. That was a huge lesson for me. And so I tried it, and I took them, and I didn't write them, but at least I had them with me, and I still know where they are. And so what I'm doing right now is, if I'm getting a new request for something, I don't respond to it until I've written one current thank you note and then one on my old list. So
it's almost like a reward. Yeah. Yeah, because, you know, we want to pursue those new requests for speaking, but if you're saying, okay, I'm going to do a current and a past one, and I bet those people who get the past ones are just delighted.
Well, you know, I sent one off that was about a month late, but part of it was I just had so much I wanted to say because it was such a wonderful experience. And, you know, we don't always get feedback,
right?
But every now and then we do.
Yeah.
And she emailed me right back, and she said, "Thank you so much. As God's timing always is, the timing was perfect. I needed to hear it." And she said she'd respond to me as soon as she wiped the tears, because I had gone into some detail about some things I really appreciated. Well, of course, that then gave me the motivation. And reminded me, it's not just, they like me, they want me, somebody new wants me. It's no. The people I've already been with value me, and I need to show them, and I can show them, the value that I have for the experience that they gave me. Because when we go speak, it's not just us giving. It's a reciprocal blessing.
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, and I think that we want to be people of integrity, and we want to have these core values. And it's more than just wanting to do that. Yeah. It's actually doing it. And so, and there's procrastination. There are all those things. If, sometimes thank you notes are hard for me, especially if I know somebody is a former teacher. Because I'm afraid that I'm going to have, and all of my friends are former nurses or teachers, or current nurses and teachers. I don't know why I'm attracted, well, I guess I do know why I'm attracted to those kind of people. But because I'm dyslexic, spelling is not my strong suit. I sure love
you have beautiful handwriting.
Oh, you're very sweet. My brother used to describe it as a serial killer.
I don't think so.
So I understand. I procrastinate sometimes on silly things, but even though I hold them dear as a value, I let perfectionism get in the way. So when we were talking about this, I was talking about what I get involved in new projects when. And we say, this is the things that we do, and the W is for the things we want to do. And I am really, really striving to say, I'm only going to commit to new things when I've had enough rest since finishing my last one. Aww. So that, for a speaker and an author, that looks a little different, because at least, we make these commitments years in advance sometimes, especially for books. And so I finally had to go to my publishers and say, this is my timeline. Yeah. I cannot compromise, because, and I went at a good time, because I had just so epically had such a hard time with my last book that my poor editor was having to carry me through the entire process. This is the one I finished right as my dad passed away. And he's like, I can vow, Kathi needs the time. So sometimes we get to use those mistakes to our advantage. But I need to have some rest in between. Because one, I realize I am no good for the next project when I haven't had rest. And especially, I haven't had, and this may be more specifically for writers and speakers, but I do think it applies to parenting and work. If I haven't had a break and gone to experience some life, what business do I have writing and speaking about it? And so there's an inauthentic notion there when I'm saying, I'm doing this stuff, but really I'm spending all my time writing about stuff that I'm no longer able to live. And so that has been really important to me. And because I know my personality type, and I know that's our next chapter that we're talking about, I have to it's as important as it is to know your strengths. It's so important to know your weaknesses. And I did one thing really, really right. They say hire to your weakness. So if you're a great organizer, then you need to hire creative people. If you're a great creative, you need to hire organizers. I'm married to my weakness. So my husband is incredibly smart. He's an analytic, and those are skills I do not possess. But I also bring some fun into his life that he might not have otherwise. And so understanding the personality types and then balancing ourselves out with friendships, relationships, working relationships, and we don't get to pick our family members, but maybe choosing the kind of projects we do because of personalities and those kind of things. But you're the personality expert, so
no, and that's a great segue, because part of what I'm realizing is that there have been some gaps in my life. With this amount of speaking I've been doing recently, I'm realizing, okay, it's time for me to start just doing some scripture study just for fun. I haven't done any for a while, and I don't feel, most of what I've done has been for a purpose.
Right.
Or I've been reviewing material that I'm pretty familiar with, and I just in the last couple of weeks had a new idea for something. I'm like, oh, I cannot wait to dive in just for me. Now, at some point, I'll probably blog it. It may show up in a talk, but that's not. I mean, I have no purpose for it right now. There's no book contract waiting for it. Nothing.
Right.
I'm just about to go on a journey, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait. And so, literally, when the alarm rings in the morning, I'm more excited to get up.
Wow.
Because I have this to do. But it hasn't been that way for a while, and I think part of curing our perfect life, forgot the title already, is recognizing we have seasons and we have cycles, and then sometimes rest looks like one thing, sometimes rest looks like another, or downtime, or whatever it is that we might need. While I was sick, I finally decided the only way I could get better was to stay on the couch. Well, I don't normally sit and do things. I watched movies. I watched all the Pride and Prejudice. I watched 14 hours of Pride and Prejudice. It's the only way I could force myself to rest. It was marvelous.
Yes, no, that's a beautiful
that much
thing.
Mr. Darcy, it was great. My goodness. So, anyhow, with the personalities, I think, especially as it relates to this, I think one of the most important things is recognizing that and you already brought this up in terms of extremes, that when you take anything that's balanced and then you move it out into the extreme, one of the reasons that I thought it was important to put the personalities in here is because the analytic especially gets a bad rap. People assume that all analytics are perfectionists. And it's like, well, no, if they're, pushed to that extreme, they can be, but they strive for excellence. Right. And we count on them for that. And for those of us who have the expressive personality, people-pleasing is definitely something we have to be aware of. Right. But it's not automatic. It's not something that's definitely going to happen. For the amiable, are they always procrastinators? Maybe they just teach us how to slow down and enjoy the journey. Yeah. Maybe they're more methodical, but they could become procrastinators. Yeah. And not all cholerics, because I'm about 50-50. I'm sorry, not all drivers. Yeah. I'll edit that out.
No, it's okay.
Not all driver personalities are performancists. Yeah. We just like getting things done.
I was listening to a fascinating talk yesterday by Daniel Pink. Yeah. And he was talking about who make the best salespeople, and we all would naturally think, well, it's the people who have the expressive personalities, the extroverts. And they said that when you look at an extreme extrovert and an extreme introvert, when it comes to sales jobs, they perform about the same.
Really?
Now, isn't that interesting? Because you think about somebody who's an extreme extrovert, and we're talking about the, hey, buddy, and that kind of, and then the extreme introvert who can't even pick up the phone. But they said the person who really does the best at a sales job is the ambivert. The person who has enough of the extroverted and enough of the introverted. And most of us are defined as ambiverts. That most of us have enough introvert and enough extrovert. And so he said, what it finally comes down to is, who's a really good salesperson? He goes, and by the way, we're all salespeople. We're all trying to get people to do what we want and trade it for time, money, energy, expertise. He goes, the key to being the best kind of salesperson is to be yourself. And when I know, it's shocking. It's shocking.
What?
It's shocking. But, even Jake is shocked. You're a great salesperson anyway, buddy. But it's so true that, we spend so much time bagging on our personalities. Yeah. And, I used to be part of a group where we talked about the personalities a lot, and we would not so quietly criticize each other, like, oh, well, this type of personality is always like this. And like what you were just saying, they're not lazy. Sometimes they're intentional. But to say, what, God has equipped me with these unique strengths, and I'm not 100% anything. Yeah. I'm not 100% anything. Even I have a little tiny bit of analytical in me. I know it seems impossible, but there's something inside of me, deep inside of my bones, that loves an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm sorry, that's not an expressive trait. It's so true. I like to know when things are going to happen. And so, when we are fully committed to being who God has created us to be, and we understand that there are weaknesses that come with that, and that we need to work at those, but we also understand the strengths and how they can be used, not just in our own lives, but in other people's lives. That is a beautiful thing. So, what's the question we want to leave these guys with when we're talking about this? What's the, I think there are a couple. One would be about fear. What area of your life are you controlling, and what's the fear behind that? I think that one of my friends, when we were talking about this, she's afraid that this is so interesting. She has the cleanest house of anybody I've ever met. When we talk about you could eat off the floor, and I'm like, who would ever want to do that? You could totally eat off her floor. And, but the last time I went to her house, things were mushed. And I mean, like, they were, by the way, 10 times more perfect than anything you see around here. But it was just different. And I felt more comfortable there. I knew that. And, this is going to sound terrible, but what had happened was her mother-in-law moved to another state. She was so afraid of her mother-in-law dropping by. I mean, it was like Everybody Loves Raymond times 1,000. And she was so afraid of her mother-in-law dropping by because she would have a list of criticisms about, and she said, there's this freedom there that I hadn't experienced before. She says, but I'm so mad at myself. Why didn't I live like this before?
Wow.
And I understand, when you feel, so that was her fear, was the fear of being criticized. So,
well, and you're also making me think, those fears that you're asking us to think about, many of them are attached to our personalities.
It's so true. It absolutely is. My fear is that people won't like me or accept me. My fear is that people won't think I'm working hard enough. Those are the things. For an analytic, it might be a fear that they don't care about their job. For somebody who is more amiable, it's a fear of not connecting with other people. So
fear of conflict.
Fear of conflict. Oh yeah. Peace at all costs. And so maybe understanding what's the fear and how does that connect to your personality type. I think that's a great, I don't know that we've ever thought of that question.
No, I don't think so either. I'm taking notes on this.
This is genius right here. Genius. And you're like here. That's awesome. Okay, so those are the questions we want you to discuss. What's the fear that is locking you in control, and how does that connect with your personality type?
And then let's flip it. Let's flip
that's a good idea. Let's be positive too.
You are teaching me. You are teaching me not to just focus on the problem, but to also move to the solution.
Yes.
And I'm going to go ahead and take a little more video time here, because one of the things I've realized is that I'm really good at defining the problem. I can figure out the problem and I can describe the problem. And I realize one of my problems as a communicator is that because I'm doing it in over time. And of course, I'm doing it prayerfully, and so this is happening through scripture study. This is in conversation with godly friends. This is just in pray without ceasing sort of thing. So I might go months learning about a problem, but as I'm learning about it, it's also being solved, and I'm coming to a natural solution because that's how God is guiding me. And then I think for years now on my blog and when I've spoken, I then distill the problem. But I have forgotten that nobody else is going to experience the solution the same way. I've assumed that defining the problem solves it.
Oh, interesting. So
but it only happens if I'm living it that way. So we're going to flip. We're going to flip that and say, okay, let's have a little discussion about the fears and how they connect to your personality. And then flip it and say, okay, if this can be flipped instead of fear to love, how do you express love, especially through your personality?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if fear is that thing that's holding you back, is that a weakness being exaggerated in your personality? Spend some time talking about, really when you are at your best, when you are most you, when you are the best salesperson in being yourself, then what is it? What does love look like?
That's going to be hard for some women. That's going to be very hard. Because we can automatically think of all the times we failed. But when you're at your best, what does that love look like?
And it might involve asking people. It might involve asking special people in your life. When have you felt really loved by me? Wow.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Might come up with some really interesting answers. And if you do, we'd love to hear them.
Yes, tell us about those.